Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Kerrigan.
Welcome to Witch Talk. So welcome to Witch Talk. My name is Kerrigan, and today we have a fantastic show again, as every other show that we have. It's fantastic. We have an author that will reveal the stars to us, and we're going to talk about that with her. And also, we have some suggestions of books that I need to tell you about, because I know that you like to read, so there are some suggestions. Now, today, I just thought about doing something very traditional craft on the suggestions of the books. But before we go there, let me just tell you how to contact Witch Talk. Here we go. So, you want to know how to keep in touch with everything Witch Talk? Go to www.witchtalkshow.com and follow all the latest news. Listen directly to the show and enjoy it. Don't forget that all episodes of Witch Talk will be available to you on demand on Ustream. Click on Twitter, Facebook, or Google Plus on our own Ustream page and spread the word. Don't forget to join us on Ustream Crowd. Go to www.ustream.tv/channel/witchtalk-show. Do you want to be part of the show? Join our incredible conversations live on every show right here on Witch Talk. Witch Talk will air every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or approximately 9 p.m. in most Europe. Now, live in video, watch us on Ustream. Follow us on Twitter at Kerrigan, Kharagan, with an H after the K, or send us an email at witchtalkshow@gmail.com. Now, back to the show. And back to the show it is. Here I am with Witch Talk, and not only with Witch Talk, but also with the reviews of the books for this show. And you know, I had some. We're now. I have to tell you something. We are now on YouTube. It's very, very important to know that, because you know, Ustream doesn't have a good hosting of the shows, so we just changed, and we're now on YouTube. So you can just go there, and I think that it's www.youtube.com/user/Witch Talk Show, everything together. Or if you just type Witch Talk Show, they will tell you, you will go there right away. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every single time we have a Witch Talk Show, I will upload the episode to the to YouTube, and you can actually, you know, rate it, and you can rate the channel also. So don't forget, if you have any questions, to go there and kind of comment on the shows if you liked it and all of that good stuff. So yes, YouTube, not Ustream. So we're going to use Ustream for now to stream live, because that's the only way that we have to right now to do it. But we can do YouTube live in the near future. So we're hoping that we can do that very, very, very soon. So now, talking about the books, and the books today are concerning traditional witchcraft. And I have some books. I have 4 books of Kapelban and publishing, and they have so many books, and they're so wonderful. They're very, very good books. The first one, and this is for someone that it's obviously interested in traditional witchcraft, and by that I am talking about, not about Wicca. It's traditional witchcraft, and the first book is the Pickingill Papers. The Pickingill Papers. It's this fantastic book of Kapelban. And Pickingill, for those of you who do not know who he is, George Pickingill was, to be said, the leader of the witches in Keniljon, Essex, as described in The Dark World of the Witches by the folklorist Eric Maple in 1962. So this is there's a lot of speculation about this man and this witch, and he is absolutely amazing. And the book is very interesting because it goes in depth on clues to actually who he was and what he did. So it's very interesting. He said it's said that he had a lot of covens and groups of witches under his own hand. So this is pre-Gardnerian, pre-Alexandrian. So this is traditional witchcraft. Very nice book, The Pickingill Papers. Now the other one, which is a little bit on the other side, it's Robin Cochrane, the Rare Book in the Thicket, an anthology of the Robert Cochrane witchcraft tradition, and this is also a Capelban title. Very interesting. Robert Cochrane was one of the most fascinating and enigmatic figures in the history of the modern witchcraft revival. He claimed a family witchcraft tradition going back to the 17th century, and he also claimed that he had been taught the craft by a family member. So another book by Capelban, absolutely amazing, about traditional witchcraft. The other one, it's a little bit more recent. It's called Treading the Mill, a practical craft workings in the modern traditional witchcraft, Nigel G. Pearson, and it's also a Capelban title. Very, very good book, Treading the Mill. Starting with explanations and definitions of the book, goes on to contain crafting compass, introduction, crafting the compass, tools, calling the directions, content of the rites, closing and statement, and thanks. So it's very interesting because it's really a practical compendium on traditional witchcraft, which is really, really interesting, even for traditional witchcraft books are not really available this easy. So it's very nice to have a book which kind of goes through it and explains to you a little bit more, so that you have an idea what traditional witchcraft is. So Treading the Mill, very nice. The other one is another book by Capelban, Nigel Adcroft Jackson, and it's The Call of the Horned Piper. And it is a book that covers the symbolism, archetypes, and myths of the traditional witchcraft and the old religion in the British Isles and Europe. Another fantastic book by Capelban, and also about traditional witchcraft. So there it is, my titles for today. And we're going to just jump into our introduction for our guest, and we'll go from there with this fantastic conversation. Here we go. Renna Shesso brings a lifelong study of mystical traditions to her writing. Inspired by her herbalist/astrologer grandmother, she studied mythology and history, archaeology, tarot, the vast lore of the goddess traditions, and many other good mysteries. A longtime resident of Colorado, she is a shamanic practitioner and a teacher, and a priestess of Wicca. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on Witch Talk, Renna Shesso. Hello, Renna. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you for inviting me onto the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's wonderful to have you here, because one of the things that I really like is, and I'm very curious, I don't know too much about it in depth, is astrology, and I really, really love it, and all of the anything that it's connected with the stars, I really, really have a little bit of a passion to it, although I really need to learn a little bit more about it. And but before we go there, I just wanted to welcome to the show. You do have a book. It's called A Magical Tour of the night sky. We have the book. We're going to talk about it, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about Renna, and to know, when did you begin to be interested? I don't know where you want to begin in the journey, if it is astrology or paganism, but I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about you, and when did you begin to be interested in, let's just say, paganism, or the pagan path?
Pagan path, ooh, probably about the same time I became interested in the night sky. There was something so magical about it, and we're talking about back in childhood. Mm-hmm. It was just such a place of wonder. My grandmother, on my mom's side, was an amateur astrologer, pardon me, mm-hmm. and was the first person who taught me to do charts. And we're talking about back in the day where you basically did do the math with a pencil and paper. It was this really pre-download from the internet, and not handheld calculators really either. And there was something fascinating about that. It was the first math-friendly experience I can remember having, because I was not a math kid in school. And when we did family camping trips, a lot of what we did was look at the stars and just wonder over them, enjoy them, take hikes by starlight or moonlight. Mm-hmm. Her son went on to become a NASA scientist, which is
wow.
Kind of interesting. So he apparently liked the stars as well.
I guess, right?
Yeah, I guess. And I pursued astrology for some years early on, but realized that that's not really my forte. It's the symbolic system. There isn't one that I feel particularly conversant in. Mm-hmm. Some people are very gifted astrologers, and I understand portions of it, but that's not really the strength of my path. Mm-hmm. So technically speaking, and sorry if this comes as a big bombshell, this is not technically an astrology book. Mm-hmm. It's more of an astronomy book for people that are spiritually enough connected to the night sky that they're probably also interested in astrology. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because, if you go back far enough, that was one science. Now there are two sciences. But once upon
exactly.
a time, if you studied the stars, you were an astrologer, astronomer. The two things weren't seen as separate. And of course, now they couldn't be too much farther apart. Most astronomers have no use whatsoever for astrology. And I find a lot of astrologers can't really identify anything in the night sky, which is a little sad. Somewhere along the line, as I grew into adulthood, I also really became fascinated with the early monuments, things like Stonehenge, and the mystery around those. Mm-hmm, the fact that they were associated with the directions of the rising sun, setting sun, different positions of the moon. I remember watching a program on that in the 60s, and just my heart just soared. It was like I'd found my real church.
Wow.
Yeah. Open to the sky. I mean, it was the place. It was like someone recognized that magic and they found a way to mark it. And I don't understand that yet, but someday I'll understand more. And along the line in that time, I also became deeply connected with the goddess path, which over time shifted into something that was much more witchcraft, craft-oriented instead of specifically goddess only. Mm-hmm. And added into that some years later, also a deep practice of shamanism, which isn't contradictory the way I do it, at least. So it's kind of a mingled path. The subtitle on this book is actually "Use the Planets and Stars for Personal and Sacred Discovery."
Yes.
So there's quite a bit of stargazing in here, but it all comes back to, where does that connect with you in your spirit? Because during the course of writing this book, I kept asking people, do you have a favorite constellation? What do you like about the night sky? And I don't know if I talked to anyone that didn't have a favorite star or a favorite constellation. There's just something so magical. And I wasn't necessarily even speaking with people on a path similar to my own. You know, this could have been my hair cutter. You know, it could be anybody, but people have that sense of wonder about the sky. So this one opens up a lot of possibilities for so many people because it's just such a place of mystery.
You know, one of the things, I don't know if you agree with me, Renna, it's that we do forget to look up. There's a point, absolutely. You know what I mean? There's a point in your life where you kind of like, you're absolutely amazed, and this has to be with, you know, it has to do with developmental issues. The child will be very curious, and we actually basically literally look around every single direction, including the sky. And the sky is something that it's so beautiful when you're a child, because everything looks so big and immense, and, you know. And then when we grow up, and you pass adolescence, it's all about you, and it's all about the others, and all about you and the others, and from then on, we just, you know, we're stuck in this phase of development about you and the others, and we just forget about the sky and everything beyond. So it's just, you know, do you agree with this? What do you think?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I think as we grow up, there's a huge emphasis, at least in our culture, on kind of staying down to earth and using our minds rather than the mind as separate from, say, imagination. Something I've also seen in my lifetime, when I was a kid, I grew up outside Chicago, which is a very developed area. It was then, but more so now. But we could see the Big Dipper easily. We could see the Milky Way most nights. The sky was quite a bit clearer. There was less light pollution. There's quite a bit more of that now, but what I've realized, you know, that idea of memes where it's kind of the truism that everyone accepts as a factual thing. The number of people that say, oh, but you can't see the night sky from the city. Well, if you really believe that, you won't try. So there's
don't even look.
Don't even look. And most of the stargazing in this book was done from my backyard, on the outskirts of Denver, but I don't mean like out in the country outskirts. I mean, you know, one of the major suburbs, right, you know, 2 blocks off the main drag. So plenty of light pollution and still plenty of stargazing to be had. But if you believe you can't see the stars, you don't even try.
Absolutely. And one of the fascinating things, you know, about stars, and this might be even seem very simple, but it's really not really a simple idea, and I'm sure that the philosophers will go on and on about this, and the occultists also, is that the idea that we do belong to something greater. There is something else than just us, and, you know, in this day and age, we are centered in ourselves, just because we live in society, and society is structured that way. But I think that it's so healthy to really continue to do that, you know, that communication, that you know, acknowledgement, and you know, some very, very well-known occultist said one day that every man and every woman is a star, and you know, we actually are. If you think about, you know, how everything actually began, it's just we have stardust in us, and it's very beautiful, and some people do really reconnect afterwards, but I'm sure you know a lot of them.
Yes, I think I've met some of them, absolutely.
You know, to look up and to kind of reconnect again. So I think that, you know, it's really about this idea of connection and acknowledgement. Who are we? You know, and then you begin to think about these things. Who are we? And but what really fascinates me, it's all of these figures. These drawings, these personifications of the constellations and the clusters of stars that actually are absolutely amazing. You do have some in this fantastic. I mean, I always do this, Renna. I always mention who actually created the cover of your books. And the cover images are nebulized. It's also Davian from Stone Age, and you have a little pictures. But the cover design was done by Jim Werner. Thank you, Jim. It's a great cover. Thank you very much for doing this. It's amazing. Do you know Jim? You know Jim?
I don't think I met Jim. I've been out to Weiser, but I don't recall if we met because I showed up kind of unannounced. But I love the cover.
I just love it. Jim, congratulations. He's fantastic.
Symbolically covers a lot of territory that is within the book, including things like Stonehenge, because there's quite a bit in here about the different monuments and markers worldwide. But yeah, that idea of constellations. I mean, even before we were scratching things on the walls of our caves, I suspect our distant ancestors were out there looking up at the night sky and playing connect the dot things with the stars, looking at the images and saying, doesn't that look kind of like, wow, those could be the horns and those are the eyes of the bull. Wow. And, making things up. Because that's what we do as humans. We make up stories and we're creative and make up picture ideas too. So in a sense, it's kind of the original storybook. The word Zodiac actually means circle of animals. And not every Zodiac is an animal, but most of them are, or at least part animal. That's true. And the idea that this has maintained so long through human history, because those constellations go back to the Babylonians, at least, possibly earlier, because they've been finding earlier and earlier monuments, Göbekli Tepe in particular, in Turkey, which I don't know that I've seen anything conclusively talking about star connections at this point, but given the scope of what they built and the fact that some of the carvings do show zodiac animals as part of the imagery, I'd be stunned if it didn't have some connection to the sky. Humans didn't seem to bother with putting that much work into something that didn't in those early times. That need to feel like we were part of the gigantic clock, part of the gigantic system, kind of marking where we were for the heavens, so maybe they knew that we were paying attention to them. Who knows what some of the motivation was. But, years later, we're looking at these incredible locations, including a number of sites in the U.S., which I think kind of don't get enough attention. Everybody's heard of Stonehenge. Not everybody has heard that much about Chaco Canyon. Chimney Rock is in Colorado, which I've been to multiple times. There's sites in New Jersey. Certainly things in Ohio with the the mound builder sites there that have connections to the night sky. And this is worldwide. And, Americans weren't kind of the ugly stepchild on this. We had our monuments here too, and we just don't realize what they were. Once the lore is lost, we don't necessarily look at it and go, oh, yeah, okay, that's pointing at the summer solstice sunrise. Wow, that's not something I instantly recognize.
Well, the thing is
it's reclamation.
Absolutely. One of the things that it really is fascinating about your book is that I just love, and people, sometimes people ask me, what is your favorite chapter? I really do love chapter 0, which is like the first chapter, really. And it's very nice because it really explains everything very well in a very, very simple way. I love the title, The Following of the North Star. And and why the connections with the runes and the connections with the spinning wheels and all of that. It's just amazing, and this recurrence of this form, of the round forms and all of the forms that and the symbols of that. It's just amazing. Now, one of the things that and you go through history and you go about the differences the differences between the summer solstice at midnight, the winter solstice at midnight, and you can see it's just amazing. I just love it. But one of the most amazing things that I love about this book is the last part of the chapters, which is you just you call it learn by doing, which is absolutely amazing. So you have some suggestions, and on this particular chapter you have 6 on how can you do it, and really kind of, so this is not really just an informative book. This is actually a practical book that you can actually use to learn by doing, which is amazing. Now you do have here one, and everybody, the North Star is very famous. It's almost like the Marilyn Monroe of the sky. It's just very famous. And you do have here, to get to know the North Star, find the great chariots and Polaris in the night sky. Note their positions relative to each other. And then you go on and on and on by, giving specific, specific things so that people can, and then you ask questions. So it's very, very interesting. Why did you put this in? I mean, normally, someone would just kind of write the book and that's it. You are concerned about people learning this and help them a little bit more.
Thinking back to how I learned these things, I remember going on Scout camping trips as a young kid.
Yes.
There was actually a marker set that you'd hike to, and it was sighted so you could locate the North Star. And the idea that we orient ourselves by a particular place in the sky, that just endlessly fascinates me. And I mean, ancestors have used that area, maybe not the same star, and we can talk about that in a bit, but using that as a way to orient, which way am I going? How do I get where I need to be? How do I have a sense of direction? And orienting yourself before beginning the book just made the most sense to me, because this is a lot of material. The night sky's pretty big, and I've got it wedged into under 300 pages here.
Yeah, that's true.
So to make some sense of that, let people get a bit of a grasp of it. And like what you were saying a second ago about winter solstice at midnight, that, of course, is the position of the Big Dipper relative to the North Star at the time of the winter solstice at midnight, because it's going to be different throughout the year. It's changing. We see different constellations at different times of the year, and that's one that it took me a while to even wrap my head around, that of kind of like, I always notice Orion right around Christmas and New Year's, Yule. He's always right overhead about midnight, but other times of the year he's not. How did that happen? Well, it happens because we're rotating around the sun, we're spinning in space. Different things show up at different times, because as synchronized as this all is, it's not perfect.
Yeah, of course.
And how boring would that be?
No, of course, exactly. Now, one of the things that that brings me to is you talked about Stone Age. You do have a chapter here about special places and ancient places that are connected with the stars. Now, one of them is Stonehenge, which is, everybody knows Stonehenge, and right. There's the various places on Earth that happened. Are they out of date? Meaning, are they not showing up the alignment that they actually did at the time that they were built? And we are actually seeing things that are kind of very, very off of what the purpose actually was.
No, I think they're not.
They're not? Okay. I just wanted to ask you that.
No. If you were trying to synchronize them to the equinox point, then with the stars, that would be different. But in terms of sunrise, sunset at the solstices and equinoxes, not a problem. In terms of the maximum northern point for the moon, maximum southern point of the moon, things like that, those still work. There was a terrific documentary made a few years ago called, I think it's just called The Mystery of Chaco Canyon, where they look at the entire layout of Chaco Canyon, which is a huge expanse of land, and different sites within that canyon, where buildings are aligned over miles, where if you were standing at one looking toward the other, it would be exactly aligned with the moonrise at its northern extreme, which only happens every 19 years. And in some cases, there's actually buttes in between those two buildings.
Wow.
So, they were calculating it without having to actually see it. I mean, they figured out ways to do this. And this isn't just one pair of buildings. This is throughout the entire complex. So they couldn't have just done it accidentally. The odds against that are pretty extreme. It was intentional. They were marking these different points in the lunar cycle, which makes this solstice and equinox cycle, which plays out every year, look like child's play. The lunar cycle is far more complex, but Stonehenge is still correctly aligned for that. So is the site that I mentioned that's in New Jersey, the Octagon site, which I think still exists and didn't get plowed under because there's actually a golf course parked on top of it. Very spiritual, I'm sure. But the site exists.
It's the worship of the white ball. Didn't you hear about that? Yeah, it's a new kind of tradition.
Symbolizes the orb of the moon, perhaps.
Yes.
But no, those sites aren't out of date. And I know some complaints about Stonehenge, about, the heel stone's not absolutely, totally precise. But, maybe that was never meant to be. I don't know that the ancient people dealt with precision in the same way that we do and we can. If you had, say, a 3-day gap to match something up, well, maybe you get a couple of overcast days and you have your festival the night of the 3rd. Who knows? I think they probably allowed for more wiggle room than the kind of precision that we have, where if the repairman's an hour late getting here, we're all freaking out. I think they viewed time differently. So, some of these windows are a bit large, but in terms of, the sun is coming through this angle, some of that stuff is laid out in a way where maybe it actually angles into her for 4 days in a row. I don't consider that a deal breaker. I consider that practical building on the part of people that built it to do what they needed it to do for their ceremonial reckonings of worshiping their sky gods.
It's absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes absolutely sense. It's just now we know that all of this knowledge is very ancient. We know that we just talked about the how back this can go. I mean, we know that most of the cultures, but used some kind of astrology, and we do know that. You just said it, that we're finding even early sources. So this is absolutely amazing. Now, what is, in your opinion, and I know this, obviously, the subtitle of the book is Use the Planets and Stars for Personal and Sacred Discovery. In your opinion, and this is a very generalized opinion, I know that I'm going to be, obviously this can't be said about all of them because everything has to be taken in the culture that they were performed. But in your opinion, why do you think that men, all over the eras, looked at the sky always? But we know that it's for orientation. Some of the things, we know that, navigation in the early days were done by the stars also. They oriented themselves by the stars and all of that. And they still do, which is amazing, because when everything fails, you just look up.
Right.
And I hope that they do it. They do teach that to, captain school or whatever it is, school, naval school, that they do. I think they have to have, astronomy and all of that. But I think that what I wanted to ask you is, what do you think it is, in your opinion, of researcher and of what do you think that is the reason why men looked up in the first place? I mean, what do you think?
I don't know how we could help it. It's so interesting. It's just so amazing.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
beautiful,
It
and
is beautiful.
grand in ways that people use various words for this. Of, oh, it makes me feel so small and humble. I don't know that it makes me feel small and humble. It makes me feel part of something that's so gigantic that I'm content to be a fairly small piece of it. Because
Hmm.
there's so
Hmm.
many, there's so many stars, and the idea that I'm just one human here looking at them. But there's
Hmm.
a sense with the night sky that you're somehow sharing in their mystery when you see them, and I
Hmm.
think that just connects with a sense of wonder within us that is undeniable and unquenchable. It has
Yeah.
maintained our human interest for thousands of years.
That's
Um,
true. That's absolutely true.
there's an interesting story I heard recently, and I think it was Joseph Campbell telling this, of being on a research hike with Jane Goodall
Hmm.
with the chimpanzees, and as they were watching them, um, there was a storm brewing, and there was this huge clap of thunder, and the male monkeys went
Hmm.
into protect and fight and roaring mode where they're beating their chests and roaring back as if they had been challenged. But, early humans, for all we know, had the same reaction when they heard that blast in the sky
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
we're being talked to. We just got yelled at by something ferocious, and we better pay attention. Because, a lot of those early sky gods are depicted as holding thunderbolts and, Thor and his hammer. There's a lot of lore connected with those sky gods, and we took that seriously. Whether we cowered in fear or stepped up to say, "I will be your ally," it got our attention, and there was that sense of probably I'd rather have him on my side than be his enemy. um, but a lot of those louder, thundering kind of sky gods tended to be perceived as male. I don't know that I found anything viewing them as female, but
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
qualities of rain are perceived as female.
Yes. Well, it's
And
Renna,
things the
I'm
sky are seen as female. So,
I'm 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 Portuguese originally, so in the Portuguese languages, I think also in French or any other Latin language, we do attribute. Well, first of all, we don't have it in our
mm,
language,
right,
so everything is female or male.
right,
Even dogs, cats, tables, doors.
sure.
Obviously they don't have sex, but they don't have a gender.
That's
But
what they watching.
yes, but we refer to them as as that, and
Yeah.
stars are female, which is very interesting. Planets are male. The
Yes.
words, I mean.
Yeah.
Which is very interesting. Now, you do have on chapter
You know,
one.
that makes
No,
a
go
lot of
ahead.
sense.
Sorry.
Interesting.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. Did I interrupt you? No.
Oh, no, go for it.
Oh, okay. So on chapter
No,
one, the
no,
zodiac,
you were asking about chapter one?
yes, yes, the zodiac, our circle of animals. You go through the various animals that represent, the various signs of the zodiac. So Taurus, Gemini, the twins, all of that, Cancer, the crab. Now, this always fascinates me, and you really go into a very interesting description. I'm, according to this zodiac, I am a Taurus. And you go on and describe what it is and how was it perceived by the different cultures, which is absolutely amazing. You say, the Egyptians believed that the human race was created when the sun was in Taurus at the spring equinox, and then you go and say the dates. The goddess Bat, one of their earliest deities, was portrayed with a cow's face, and then you go and so it's very beautiful because you really kind of you go on and say how things were perceived by various cultures. Now, this always fascinates me, Shanna. It's how is it possible that I am, we are all very individualized human beings. How can it be so accurate? All of these characteristics of each of the animals and slash signs of the zodiac, the characteristics of all of these signs to be so accurate with the personalities that are developed, and you can say, oh, he's so Taurus, or he has a, you know what I mean, or he's such a Gemini. So how is this so accurate? I mean, are we that influenced by the planets or by the positions of the sun and the moon when we are born?
One of the better explanations I heard of this, and that dichotomy that exists now between astronomy and astrology, is astronomy is a science and astrology is an art. And I really like the sound of that, because the best astrologers I know are working with a certain intuitive gift when they do their interpretation. And the writing about that, I think, is amazingly poetic and insightful and encompasses certain things about our characters. Now, when you talk about being a Taurus, that would be your sun sign. I'm a Virgo. If you look at the whole rest of your chart, you would be called a Taurus because theoretically the sun was in line with the constellation of Taurus at the time that you were born. But the other planets would have been in line with different constellations. So when you actually get an astrological chart done, it's kind of a map of the heavens and where the different planets were at the time of your birth. Your rising sign would be whatever constellation was right along the eastern horizon at the moment of your birth. Chances are the moon was not right next to the sun, unless it was a dark of the moon, new moon.
Yes.
And the other planets are going to be elsewhere around that band of zodiacal stars. You're never going to have a sun sign in the Big Dipper. It just doesn't work that way. We pay attention to those zodiac signs because they're along the ecliptic, which is the path that the sun takes through the sky. And because we're orbiting the sun and so are the other planets, we're also moving along that pathway, that ecliptical pathway. So the other planets are going to show up along that same band of sky that lays along the path of those particular constellations. So if anybody says that they have their Mars in Ursa Major, they apparently came from some different solar system or something, or they're just deranged, because Mars won't be in Ursa Major. Mars is going to be somewhere along the path of the zodiac. Why it's as profound as it is, I don't know. I can't claim I understand how it works. I'm not sure any of us do, but there's such deep lore, such deep history going back with this. Something there really resonates with the human imagination. I think that's why it's held our attention for thousands of years, and why we do look at the zodiac and check our horoscopes in the paper, read our little zodiac matches, have our charts done, talk about, how they are, they're a Scorpio, and draw conclusions, sometimes pretty unfairly, about our various acquaintances based on what their signs are. If it wasn't accurate part of the time, we wouldn't do that.
Absolutely.
I think it's accurate quite a good bit of the time myself, but
I know.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And if you think about the moon, and and if you think about the influence that the moon has, people sometimes they go by the moon. They just kind of begin in the moon. Well, if the waters actually react to the moon, and if it is like this kind of the gravity and all of that, and because of the pulling and everything, so the tides and all of that, we certainly are influenced by other planets, and there are other forces that actually are in play here. So yes, we do have this very strong influence about all of them. Now, another thing that right. So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, it's the it's this very rebel. Everybody, that it's pagan. Everybody that I know, every single people that I am in contact with, they panic when it comes to Saturn, Mercury retrograde. So.
Oh, I know. Isn't that so?
You know what I mean? Okay.
Yeah.
So are we all very delusional when it comes to this? Is this psychomatic, or is it really happening?
I think a lot of it's psychosomatic, and I'm guessing I'm older than you.
Yes.
Looking at your handsome picture here on the screen. I think I'm a bit older, but I'll tell you what. Back when I was a teen and in my early youthful college years, nobody talked about Mercury retrogrades. The only people you would ever hear that from were other astrologers. People weren't talking about it on the bus, making excuses at work. It has become another one of those memes that I don't think serves us particularly well, but it makes a heck of a good excuse when your boss thinks you should be done with something, but the computer's down. Now, come to think of it, computers go down a lot. So, and the rest of the time, it's not a Mercury retrograde, but suddenly it is. I know this topic came up in a room full of people I was in a while ago, and somebody just said, it's everybody's way of making stupid excuses. And I thought it was slightly harsh, but not necessarily wrong. And the fact that it's kind of made it into the public lexicon at this point totally cracks me up. It seems to be everybody's favorite way of saying communications are bad right now.
Yes, I don't want to talk to you.
It's unfortunate when it becomes an excuse for being a poor communicator.
Yes, exactly.
Communication is so valuable in everything we do. We know that the speed of it has increased rapidly over even the last 5 years. It just keeps getting quicker. With everything on the internet, everything with cell phones, the technology is becoming so rapid that we're hyper aware of it. And it's more important than ever. And much as I would love to think that all my cute gadgets do the trick for me, ultimately it's me that needs to be the communicator. And to have a bit of a break where I can just say, oh, Mercury's retrograde, communications are poor, is kind of a nice little vacation excuse on that. But I don't think Mercury does that much. Now, somebody that I was interviewing many years ago and brought this subject up to, she was opening a number of exhibitions of her late husband's artwork. Mm-hmm. And I asked her, well, Mercury is retrograde right now, and I've heard that you're interested in astrology, so I was wondering what the rationale was of opening a display like this at this time. And she said that when Mercury is retrograde, it's communications about the past. It's a great time for that. And the person I was talking to was Yoko Ono.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I thought that was one of the most useful pieces of information I ever got on astrology. Yeah. The idea that, when the planet seems to be moving backwards, which is all retrograde is, they don't really put it in reverse, but it looks like that from where we are here on our planet. Yes. It looks like the planet is moving backwards through the constellations. And the idea that that could be used as a time to concentrate particularly on things out of our own past. How useful is that? Because a lot of us have, I'm just guessing, but I suppose a few of us have some old baggage that could stand a little bit of a review. And that could be a good time to do it. Rather than use it as a reason to not communicate clearly, what if we work on our own communications with our own unresolved stuff and put it to some good use?
Absolutely. Now that is the piece of information that I really wanted, because the next question would be, is there anything about Mercury that we can actually use? Well, there is. There you go.
I think that's one of them. I think that's a huge piece of that.
Absolutely.
One of my challenges in the Learn by Doing section on Mercury is just please learn to find it in the sky and actually see it with your own two eyes before you blame it for anything else. And that's a pretty good challenge, actually, because I think I've seen Mercury maybe 4 times during the time that I was writing the book. I think I spotted it for sure 4 different times, and I'm not sure I've seen it too many more times for sure during my life. Mercury is hard to spot. Remember, it's the closest to the sun, so its orbit is going to stay real close to the sun. It's not going to be up late at night. It's going to be visible only right after sundown or right before sunrise, with maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2-hour window each way. And a lot of times not even that much. So seeing it is pretty tricky. It's small, it might be bright, but unless you've got a good vista, open vista to the east or the west, you're probably not going to spot it. But there's my challenge to anybody listening. Before you blame poor little Mercury for anything else, learn to recognize it in the sky.
Yes, yeah.
But,
and it's I think that is there any other planet that has that bad reputation?
Saturn.
Saturn has it, but what about Saturn?
Well, Saturn, anytime anybody says Saturn return, there's always dread in their voice. Saturn return. Saturn return. And, maybe because I've got a really fabulous astrologer who's able to shed light on that kind of thing for me, I just don't have that kind of apprehension about it. The view that I take is more anything that didn't get resolved, that was big issue stuff on my first Saturn return, which is the one that happens when you're 28, 29, somewhere in there. Anything that didn't get resolved then, that's still hanging around when you hit your second Saturn return, is likely to rear its head even more ferociously and insist on being looked at.
Yeah.
So if you're taking care of business and you're trying to lead a good, aware life, which doesn't just mean criticizing the universe so much as taking a look at your own stuff.
Exactly.
Fruitful to do.
Yes.
It's probably not a big deal.
Now, what
during most of human history on this planet, the human lifespan was really only about 30 years.
Yeah, it was.
So about the time you were reaching your first Saturn return, if you even made it to your first Saturn return, you were probably one of the longer-lived people of your tribal group.
Yeah, exactly.
So, it has kind of an old, ancient association with mortality.
Absolutely.
It was the slowest moving planet that was visible to the naked eye. And that is one particular thing about this book. Everything in here is naked eye observation. This isn't go by a telescope stuff. So I don't talk about poor Pluto who got fired anyway. Nothing about Neptune, nothing about Uranus, because they aren't naked eye visible planets. As far as our ancient ancestors knew, the outer edge of the universe, as planets went, was Saturn. And beyond that was the backdrop of the stars, which was called the firmament, because their relationship to each other stayed quite consistent. You could recognize the constellations. It was that other stuff moving around across them. Planet, which means traveler, wanderer, those were different. So the stars were considered to be the stable ones. The wandering ones were the planets, which might be that distinction that you said of gender terms in the language. For planet, the planet word was male, the stars female.
Yeah.
They stay at home. The planets go out and wander. Maybe they hunt. Who knows? But this is from ancient lore.
Yes, it
and
is.
I think a certain amount of this, that idea that we are formed from stardust, I think we're formed from this kind of embedded star memory as well, where for many, many human generations, our ability to keep track of the seasons, keep track of our locations, was based on some basic knowledge of the heavens and how the sun moved around the sky through the seasons. If we didn't know that, we may not have made it. So, the fact that we're here now, we're the survivors. There probably were some people that, couldn't understand these things, couldn't follow them, didn't pay attention, didn't honor the seasons, and ended up in a freezing place with no food, whatever. But, our ancestors for many generations were able to grasp this information and work with it. Those of us who are here now are their descendants. And to my sense, we probably embody a certain amount of that information on a cellular level, whether or not it makes it into our consciousness on a regular basis or not.
Now, another thing that I wanted to ask you, Renna, is that, this idea of the planets and the stars being there always. I mean, they were there since the world, as we know it, was. They have basically the same kind of, they were born not on the same in the same way or in the same day, but they were kind of there all of the same time. So I think that there's this idea of the planets and stars actually witness the past and probably the future. And there's always this idea about the planets being present and knowing it all, including the future, which is a very interesting idea. When you do astrology for people, and when we talked about the Saturn return and all of that, be aware because at 40 you will have blah blah blah. And I really because this planet is coming, and and there's this influence in here. You have this this is fascinating to me, to know that the planets can certainly influence you in the past and can influence you in the future, and you can actually predict some kind of with a fair amount of accuracy some phase that or atmosphere of influence that can actually trigger some event in your life, and so why do we do this? Why are we so obsessed with the future, and why do we use? And do you know if it is effective or not? Because some astrologers says even though they are astrologers, they don't really do that. They don't really predict because they say I'm not a seer. So how do you see this? Go ahead.
Do really make a distinction that they do not do predictive astrology. A couple of guys I know here in Denver didn't used to do much, but are doing more of it because over time they've realized that there's a huge demand, but degree of accuracy.
Yeah, there is.
I mean, it's one thing if there's a demand, but if it can't be accurate, why to meet the demand and be wrong all the time? There's just that fascination. People don't want bad things to happen to them. They want good things to happen to them. And anything that you can do to enhance your chance of having good things happen, why not do it? Absolutely. So, if the mood of the season is going to be more open to certain kind of activities and advancement and abundance than other kinds, why not be in harmony with that? And that tends to be how I take predictive type stuff, which isn't generally something I really seek out. The kind of information that I find useful is this is going to be a time to do your inner work, your creative work. Other times are going to be more useful for getting the word out about your work. That kind of thing is about as precise as I tend to like to get. Those are big enough issues to deal with. So I'm not asking for tell me a good horse in the third race or any of that stuff. But if you look at books from the 1920s and 30s,
it is true.
50s, that's a huge part of what
it is. It is.
Humongous.
Yes. Well, I think Renna. I think that this actually permeates every era of mankind. I mean, we're talking about horse racing, but I'm sure that our ancestors were really concerned about, is it a long winter? Is it really not? Is it, do we really have enough to eat? Are we going to have more children? All of those things. And I do have a lot of friends who are astrologers, and I do have a friend who actually is a tarot reader and an astrologer, and she uses both in the reading, which is very interesting. And she complements both, and it's very interesting also. Do you think that astrology can, and with to use the planet star for your personal sacred discovery, do you think that astrology needs any other device to be accurate in predicting anything or in counseling anyone, or it stands by itself?
Interesting question. I think that might depend on the person. I think that very well might depend on the person utilizing them. Because my astrologer also, sometimes when we're speaking, will draw a card or perhaps one more card from his deck of tarot cards, not so much to see what will be happening, but to get an image of the best way to express what's going to be coming. So he's already seen it in the astrological stuff, but if I'm not maybe getting it as clearly as he feels I could, he'll draw a card to inspire himself, give himself a clue of how he can best express it to me as a client. So that's yet another way to use it. I think people find all kinds of amazing combinations that are a good match for the way they work and the way they perceive that energy, that information, and how it can best be conveyed. And I have done that sometimes with my shamanic work, where I'm talking to a client after a session and will occasionally show them a tarot card just because I need a picture.
Yes.
It's kind of like, draw me a picture.
This is the picture.
Visual information goes to a completely different part and an earlier formed part of the brain than language goes.
Yes.
Language and words came later in human consciousness than the visual information did. And now when I'm doing tarot readings, people end up with some written notes. I jot down just some basic stuff, keys about each card, but then I encourage them to use their cell phone to take a shot of the layout. And that doesn't matter if they know how to read the cards. Being able to look at those images later are going to spark things in their own imagination that can give them some additional insights. So there's different ways of knowing, and it's the kind of thing where I think we each learn differently too. Some people learn very, very well from hearing information repeated. So listening to tapes in the car, CDs in the car, is going to be a really useful way for us to learn. I've sat in lectures next to people that did not take written notes. They sketched. And something about having their hand in motion and making images embodies the information for them. So some of that, we aren't identical. We're each so unique. Finding something that's a good fit for us, I think that's the vital part there. And astrology on its own, I think, can be incredibly useful for some people. Other people do well adding additional components to it. Great question. I'd be curious if there's any listeners who are wondering about that or have a strong feeling one way or another.
Or have, there are some other people who use, runes and things like that. It's the combinations are just, amazing on this.
Well, we're just curious humans. We've come up with an awful lot of ways to try and look at these things to better understand how it all fits together.
It's amazing.
It's amazing stuff.
It's absolutely amazing. Now, I think that I have, and this is just not, I'm not doing a promotion. I really, really not. I'm not, Renna. But I do recommend I don't know if you have this tarot deck, but it's absolutely amazing, and I think that it has everything to do with you and astrology and astronomy. It's not really directly related, so it's a tarot. It's actually two things. It can be a tarot and an oracle. She made two of them actually. She made an oracle and she made a tarot deck also. But she had this fantastic. Well, it's a very very nice. Amazing woman. She is an artist and also she's an actress by trade. I mean, it's just amazing. But she had one day at night, she woke up. We had her on the show a few times. She woke up in the middle of the night and she wanted to do something different. She knew that the idea was coming and she didn't know what it was. And suddenly one night she woke up and said, "Transparent tarot. Do you know the transparent tarot by Emily Carding?"
Transparent tarot. I love the transparent tarot.
It's wonderful. I just felt that it was
It is. The name is escaping me at the moment.
Emily Carding.
That's it. That's
yes.
it. It's sitting 2 feet from where I am.
How did I know that you have this tarot deck?
Well, you probably named one of about 60 and gotten a yes, but...
Or maybe because I'm a witch. We never know.
You know, it might be that. It might be that. And I might have a lot because I'm a witch. So there you go.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Now, I love that tarot. And for anyone who has not seen that tarot, these are printed on transparent, wow, what's that, Mylar?
Yes, I think. Yeah,
and it actually comes with white cloth to lay them on, because honestly, if you lay this down on a dark table, you're not going to see a thing. Yes. But as you draw the different cards for the reading, you layer them on top of each other to build a complex picture. And what a brilliant concept. So there's an overlay. You're overlaying one card on top of another.
It just suggested me astronomy and
yes.
Astrology and all of the the sky and all of that, because it's transparent. It's really something that it builds up. You're right. So it just struck me as the perfect medium.
That is an excellent metaphor for this, because that is what we're talking about with astrology. You're not just talking about the constellation or the planet. You're talking about that planet being in line with that constellation, as if it's overlaid.
Absolutely.
Standing in front of that constellation as a backdrop. Yes. Dealing with the two of them together, and sometimes more than two. Sometimes multiple planets next to each other lined up with a particular constellation. So yeah, that's a really good analogy.
I just felt that I had to say it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting way to do an astrological chart too. Do it as an overlay of cards.
Exactly.
That can be a fun exercise. I've used this sometimes in classes where people come in with their astrology charts and their tarot decks, and using one system or another to associate the major arcana with the different constellations and planets. And take your pick. There's probably a dozen different versions of that. But laying out your chart with the cards and seeing what new insights that brings in.
It's very interesting. I'm very interested in combination of things, and these are, I know that I have a friend who does use the tarot to actually complement as a complement of her astrology work and charts and everything else. But I think I just thought about the transparent tarot for you.
Yeah.
And little did I know you had it already.
I don't read with it, but I work with it sometimes.
Yes.
People that are interested in tarot, this is not a book about tarot, but there's quite a bit of tarot reference in here, because so much astrological symbolism is embedded into the tarot. Yeah. One of the exercises that I have definitely found more fruitful, and this is one that you can repeat every year for a few months at a time, Jupiter is retrograde, where it's appearing to go backwards. Now, Jupiter, unlike unhappy little Mercury with its bad reputation for being retrograde, Jupiter is usually considered a really benevolent planet. It's associated with happy things, abundance, success, increase. It's got positive associations. And one of the things that I arrived at during the time I was working on the book, I wanted a tarot reading to go with Jupiter, and I realized, well, Jupiter's retrograde. What can we do with that? Well, Jupiter's cycle, in many ways, is very tied to the zodiac in terms of it repeats every 12 years. So if you were looking at a Jupiter zodiac, a Jupiter retrograde happening this year, you would refer back to what happened 12 years earlier in your life. And if you keep any kind of journals or notebooks, you might be able to pinpoint, these were the issues for me 12 years ago. And the reading is meant to bring out, where have I gotten to since then? What has been resolved? How have I grown in these different areas? And is there anything lingering from those times, 12 years earlier, that I could look at and resolve now? So you're not looking at it again 12 years hence. This is an amazingly fruitful reading. And I was talking with an astrology tarot buddy of mine a while ago during the Jupiter retrograde that I ended a while back in March. But she was saying, I haven't been having the weirdest week. This happened, that happened, and now this woman just walked in that I used to work with at a different job 12 years ago. And I said, 12 years ago, do that Jupiter retrograde reading. And she says, oh my gosh, that is crazy, because the other things also related back about 12 years. And, this is a pretty happy reading. I'm not into gloom and doom readings that say, oh, wow, what a bummer, you're doomed, don't leave the house. That's not a useful reading of any kind to me, but I know sometimes people get into that because, I don't know, maybe it feels powerful to scare your client. I don't know. But I prefer readings that give me something useful I can do to make things more effective, better, run smoother, clear up dilemmas. I'm into things getting fixed and better.
No, let me ask you, let me just interrupt you in here because I think that it's important. Do you think that how can we change this? If there is some influence that it's not that positive, let's just say, something about the work, you're kind of, there's so many layoffs, unfortunately, nowadays. Yeah. So if there's this kind of atmosphere, can we do something about, how can we do something about it when something like that comes up in a chart, or a work, an astrology work? How can we not fix it, but because we have this idea that the planets cannot really be moved. Oh, let me just move Jupiter for you, or Mars. You know what I mean? Oh, let me just get out of the way. No, you can't do it. So how can you? What in your experience? What is the solution here? How can you turn something that it's kind of gloomy, as you said, into something a little bit more positive?
Yeah, and I would agree. I don't see the word fix being so useful here, but alleviate, modify, work with that energy. Just being aware of something is going to shift what happens. Yeah. So, there are certain cards that I'll see to come up in a tarot reading that I just take to be kind of a red flag of, well, watch out for this kind of thing. Be aware of this. An opportunity to shoot yourself in the foot might be coming. Just be aware that you don't have to do that. So that kind of information, usually people can really adapt and kind of be aware of. And that awareness is often enough to shift things. This doesn't necessarily cover the vagaries of the workplace, because we're living in times where a lot of that's coming up. And I don't know that there's any big fix-it that's going to show up in an astrology chart or a tarot reading. Sadly, that would be ideal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some of this really gets into a political question of how do we rebuild a somewhat dysfunctional economy in ways that are going to be more useful and user-friendly for all of us. Yeah. It's really win-win for all of us. And, that's bigger than one chart or one reading or, any one person. It gets into, though, communication and community. And
that's true.
those are vital questions, and they might be kind of outside the scope of this. But to me, the more aware we can each be of taking care of our own unresolved junk, because we all have some.
Yeah.
But if we're lugging it around and acting it out on those around us, we're not making things better for them or ourselves.
That's
so the
true,
healthier we each can be in our own emotional health, psychological health, of course physical health too, but this isn't just about getting out and jogging. The more fulfilled we can be in terms of dealing with our own stuff, learning from it, getting, I hate it when people say, oh, there's a lesson here for you, as if they're the schoolmaster and they know what that is. I think there's bountiful lessons in everything that's going on around us. I don't think it's just one particular school book, so to speak. But the more aware we can be for ourselves of how does this impact me? Is this old stuff that I can come to terms with and move through and move past, acquire whatever lessons are available, not repeat them, wise up, and be better, stronger, more fulfilled, more in touch with that life force within myself in ways that I become a brighter light in my community instead of feeling like, dark shadows when I'm walking around. So some of this is just that, deal with our own stuff, work through it, and become lights for others.
Very interesting. Very, very good. Very good advice. Ladies and gentlemen, Renna, how do you pronounce your last name? Renna?
It's Renna.
Renna, sorry. I always say Renna. I don't know
That's
why.
okay.
It's Renna.
The last name is Shesso.
Shesso. Yes, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Okay. Because sometimes I have a hard time on, I always have a hard time on pronouncing names anyway, but...
names are tricky, and you know how peevish we all get when our names are mispronounced. So.
Oh, I know. But, yeah. So I think that it's very important. First of all, we're talking with Renna Shesso, the author of The Magical Tour of the Night Sky. Use the planets and stars for personal and sacred discovery. Now, this is a very, very interesting book. Not only because it's a book that it will inform you about how to do. I would say old school, looking into the heavens and sky and kind of figure it out, like measure it with your hand, which is absolutely amazing to me.
Sure,
but
yeah,
isn't that amazing? Because you do the measuring. But the thing is, also because it will kind of guide you to know the planets and to know the skies and constellations and everything. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, Renna, is the equinoxes, and you do have the chapter 3, the possession of the equinoxes, which I have a friend. His name is Jade Salt Luna. He's a fantastic artist and also astrologer, and he wrote a book. We talked about this in behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yes, we do talk behind the scenes. And he has this idea that this system is really not accurate concerning the zodiacs, and that we are all a sign behind, because this was not adjusted. The axis of the of the Earth was shifted, and there was not an adjustment done. I'm not sure if I'm doing justice of his argument. I'm sure that probably he will do a great job than me. But the thing is that you do talk about this. I mean, we know that this idea of eras, the era of Aquarius,
right?
The era of, it's the movement of the equinoxes. But how do we? Is there any correction that we need to do?
Honestly, I think for astrology, I would say overall no. If you have found somebody who's a great astrologer for you and expresses things in a way that you understand them and get useful, workable information out of it, you're good. And for some people, that's something much more Vedic, because Hindu astrology kept up with the precession of the equinoxes. I understand that they have adjusted for that. A lot of Western astrology has not. And that was the big scream, a year and a half ago, where somebody must have had a slow news week and they were talking to someone who was an astrologer who mentioned that, he was talking about the precession of the equinoxes, but what it came down to was that rather than perhaps your sun sign being Scorpio, perhaps it was Ophiuchus, which is this fabulous word that most of us can't pronounce. And I actually, there's a website where you can hear
listen to it.
Like, okay, yeah, it's perfect for that. But Ophiuchus, Ophiuchus didn't show up just now. He's been there all along, but he's not counted as part of the Zodiac for who knows what reasons, but he's not considered part of the Zodiac, but part of those stars do overlap onto the ecliptic. But people were freaking out because the article got picked up and all over the place. So anyone that knew anything about astrology, that's all that we heard for probably the next 6 months was, so what's this Ophiuchus thing? People talking about changing their tattoos.
Oh.
It was hilarious and weird, but also true. But the thing was, that didn't just show up. This has been the case for, almost about 2,000 years, because it was about 50 BCE that our astrology things started really going out of whack. The precession of the equinoxes, the simple explanation of it would be, if I eat lunch at exactly noon every day, and I get hungry for lunch exactly at noon every day, but my clock is running slow, and it's actually reading 11:50, would I still be hungry at the same time? I mean, it's that kind of question. So, the sun would still be in that same place to show that it was noon, it's time to be hungry, but my clock is running slow. That's the kind of unsynchronized, slightly slow, out of step thing we're talking about with Earth on its little pivotal axis in relationship to the sky. And this is something that's been subtly shifting for thousands of years. Part of what makes this so crazy is that we also work with this idea of ages. At the point that we have a spring equinox now, it is not truly in line with the sun entering Aries. That's what we work with as symbolic. The lambs are being born and the sun's going into Aries. In fact, now, at this point, at the spring equinox, the sun is actually in about 8 degrees Pisces. It's moving closer and closer to the beginning of the sign of Pisces. And in another couple hundred years, it'll be in line with Aquarius, and we can all start singing. That'll be the dawning of the age of Aquarius, but we're moving into that now. What makes this kind of goofy is that when we talk about the idea of ages, it's the age of Aquarius or the age of Pisces, we're working with the idea of 2,150 years. It takes 25,800 years for the sun to gradually move its way through the equinox point of all 12 zodiac signs. And if you divide that huge number by 12, you get 2150. It's hard to say this out loud. 2,150 years. Each age should be that long, right? Because they divide equally. Because that's just fair. Each sign should get the same amount of time. Well, the problem with this is that the signs aren't all the same size.
Whoops.
They might look like that on an astrology chart, but when you look up at the night sky, Venus has been moving through Taurus lately. It's been doing that for a while. Taurus is a huge constellation. It actually takes up 37 degrees of space along the ecliptic. Well, the ecliptic is this big circle of space. That means 360 degrees. Divide that by 12, it should be 30 degrees each if it was fair, but it's not fair. That's, whatever the great gods did when they designed our ecliptical zodiacal space, they didn't worry about each one getting an equal amount of sky space. So Aries takes up 24 degrees. Taurus is 37, Gemini's 28, Cancer's 20, Virgo's the biggest, it's got 44. Woohoo, good for me. Scorpio, there's only 6 degrees of the constellation of Scorpio laying along.
What does that mean, Renna? What does that mean in terms of influence or anything? I mean, all of these degrees. I mean, if you said, oh, good for me, what does that mean?
Well, it means, I'm kidding. It means my constellation's bigger than yours.
Oh! Thank you, Renna. Thank you very much. I thought that it was like this huge reason. Well, I'm sure there is, right?
If you're a Taurus, that one's also very wide along the ecliptic. Yeah. Now, Scorpio is actually really long and tall, but it's long and tall north to south, not so much east to west measured along the ecliptic. This is like the idea that you've got one pie and 11 relatives visiting you for dinner, and each one of you included, are going to get a slice of the pie. But somebody says, "Whoa, give me a big piece," and somebody else says, "Oh, not much for me." But it has to get divided up among those people, and it's not going to be exactly equal. So, in terms of what actually is along the ecliptic, they're all different sizes. So that idea of an age is incredibly inaccurate. How long it takes the sun to move through any one of them, it's not 2,150 years. It might just be, say 605 years is about how long it would take the ecliptic point to move through Scorpio, because only 6 degrees of Scorpio is on the ecliptic. Yeah. So, this has gotten kind of adapted and kind of talked about, but not talked about in a way that really made sense in terms of how big the constellations are. That's why I would go back to that idea that astronomy is a science, astrology is an art. Art gets to do what it wants. It should do what works. But part of this is so hard to understand, or certainly to talk about without waving my hands around. This book is massively illustrated.
It is.
A magical tour of the night sky. It's about 150 illustrations, and this chapter gets plenty of them, because this is rough stuff to get our heads around, I think. Yes. Whether you use it to do anything astrological, the point here is that when you look up in the sky these days, I'm not sure what astrology would say right now, but astronomically, Mars is in Leo. It's not too far away from the main star, the bright one, Regulus, which is right on the ecliptic. But when you look up at the sky at night, you'll see them not too far apart from each other, and Mars not looking like a red planet like it does through a giant telescope, but looking definitely peachy, orangey peachy. It's definitely distinctly warmer in color than the stars around it, and you can make out that that is Mars. It's in Leo. So it might be one place astronomically. When we talk about it symbolically for astrology, we would still work with that older system, and we're talking about it probably being someplace else in one of the adjacent signs. So there's this dilemma of what do you see if you're working with it as an astrologer versus what do you see if you actually go out the back door and look up. And they don't match. Yeah. They don't match, but somewhere along the line, I just realized that for me, they don't need to. These are two completely different systems. One is what I actually see. The other one works symbolically in terms of ways that I gather meaning to understand things in my life. And they don't have to be totally synchronized and matching. But that is one of the reasons why the two ways of exploring the heavens are so widely split at this point, and why astronomers have no use for astrology. Yes. You're not even talking about what we really see. They're not working with a symbolic system. They're working with what they actually see in the night sky. So you can see why they become fairly impatient with ideas of astrology. Did that shed any light on this? It's such a complex topic.
Oh, it is absolutely. Now, I just wanted to reference and you know, Renna, we're actually looking at your book right now, the fabulous cover by Jim, and
to the microphone so everyone can see it.
Yeah. yes. So the thing is that I just wanted to mention that I think it's from which I'm not sure which chapter it is that begins with, I think it's the sun, no, Session of Equinoxes. I think it's the moon. It begins with the moon, right? And you go through the planets, and it's absolutely amazing because you describe the planets, the motions, and everything else. It's just amazing, and then you just go in detail about that particular planet and how it moves and how everything. I mean, it's just very interesting. And then you actually related this, as you said, and very well, with the tarot. Also, and it's just a wonderful thing because we have a scoop on each of the planets, including Mercury. Just saying. And we do have a very deep understanding of history and also of astrology and astronomy about each one of them. It's very, very interesting. The beginning of each chapter begins with the name of the particular planet, and then you give a little bit of an insight of 3 or 4 words about what is that planet about. So if we talk about Venus, it's a walk with love, death, and rebirth, and then you can just see how it is and how it goes. It's just very, very beautiful. The moon, the queen of the sky. We all know that. You know, at least the witches know. Mars, is he really a planetary rebel? You know, all of those things, and then again, learn by doing. In the end of each chapter, you just kind of guide us a little bit onto what to do to see it or to kind of experience a little bit more and further. Now, one of the things that really kind of intrigued people, sometimes it's the elongations. Can you just kind of clarify a little bit about this notion of elongations? And you do have some appendixes on the book which deal with this, actually.
About that, yeah.
Go ahead.
This one makes, to me, more sense. My background is an art major. And I think pictures are a great way to understand things. In some cases, I had to understand how to illustrate these before I could totally get my own head around the orbit information. But in terms of elongations... elongation.
I said elongation. What did I say? Elongation?
But we're talking about the same thing, I think.
Well, we are. But, you know, who put the Portuguese doing the show?
Right now, if you go outside after sundown and look toward the west or north-northwest or west-northwest, you will see big, very bright Venus. And Venus is at or near its elongation from the sun right now. Now, part of how this works, I was talking about Mercury before being only visible right after sundown, right before sunrise, because it's the closest planet to the sun, so it's got this very, very tight orbit. The next one out from the sun is Venus. Mm-hmm. So again, its orbit is inside ours. It's in between us and the sun. It can't ever get on the other side of us from the sun. So nobody on Earth is going to have an astrological chart that's got a Sun-Venus opposition, right? Can't happen.
Yeah.
Better not. But if you're looking at Venus in the night sky now, it's near its elongation, which is to say it's from our angle here on Earth, it's at the far side, like, what would I say, kind of the eastern side of its position from the sun, as far out as it can go before it starts that loop back in front of the sun, where it will be conjunct with the sun, and then it continues on and moves from our standpoint to where it would be west of the sun, rising before the sun. So it'll be shifting from an evening star to a morning star. And I don't know that I've got that date here in front of me, probably not. But the lore that goes with that is absolutely fascinating. Okay, we're a little past the elongation. It actually hit that point in late March.
Yes, in late March, yeah.
Yeah.
27th, yeah.
Right, I did find it, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's still up long after the sun sets. When Venus is at its elongation, it's either rising as far as possible ahead of the sun or setting as late as possible after the sun sets. So there's just much more time to view it and enjoy it. The research that I did on Venus, there's an excellent book on Inanna that I used as a main reference on this. But as I was reading this ancient poetry to the goddess Inanna, some of the descriptions, and I know that the Babylonians, the Sumerians, equated the planet Venus with their goddess Inanna or Ishtar, depending on which era she used both names. And it's like, okay, if they equated that with the planet Venus, are they actually describing her orbital cycle? And I think they were. The story of the descent of Inanna mimics the point where Venus shifts from being an evening star, vanishes into the sunset, and then a few days later reappears in the east, which is that moment of rebirth. Mm-hmm. And I was stunned at how precise these things aligned in the poems, the songs of Inanna, with the actual motion of Venus. It was absolutely stunning.
Amazing.
Yeah, the descent of Inanna is the first version of a story where a hero, goddess, deity of any kind, heroine of any kind, willingly sacrifice themselves to journey to the underworld, undergo tests, and be reborn. And obviously this gets mimicked again and again, repeated in any number of different religions and spiritual tales. But this is the first known example of this. Some years back, they thought that the descent was for her to rescue her companion Dumuzi. But more sections of the tablets were found, and they were able to fill in some gaps in the story. And she wasn't going to rescue him. She was going to visit her sister who ruled the underworld and to make that test for herself of confronting that place of death and to see what she would learn from it. And she sets it up with her handmaiden Ninshubur to rescue her if she doesn't reappear in 3 days. And this is incredibly shamanic because there's tales throughout shamanic lore, and you may recognize them from some Christian lore as well, where something happens where someone is reborn or brought back from the dead after 3 days. But this is kind of the early version of that. And she goes on into the underworld with the understanding then that she can be rescued, but only if she will supply a substitute to take her place. And the substitute she eventually sends to her sister Ereshkigal is Dumuzi, who, in my interpretation, my reading of this, is the moon. Because at the point that Venus has disappeared into the west, we no longer see it in the night sky, and a few days later we start seeing it. She starts to become visible again as a morning star pre-sunrise. In the meantime, the moon is getting bigger each night, moving overhead, shining overhead as the full moon. Mm-hmm. But then, you know what happens after the moon is full? It gets smaller each night and disappears into the sunrise. So that idea that she passes him as they... once Venus is a morning star, it's getting higher in the sky each morning. The moon, as it's waning, gets smaller each morning and eventually disappears where it's conjunct the sun into the sunrise. So they pass each other. And the poetry that goes with this in the story is absolutely stunning. The Gala seized Dumuzi by his thighs. They poured milk out of his 7 churns. Dumuzi's shepherd's crook has disappeared. The churn lies silent. No milk is poured. The cup lies shattered. Dumuzi is no more. The shepherd's crook, the milk being poured out, the cup is shattered. You know, that sense of the waning moon suddenly no longer visible at all.
Yes, yes.
To me, symbolically, it certainly seems to fit that lunar image.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning.
Wow.
Pretty stunning stuff. And to me, that doesn't make the song of Inanna more mundane because, they're just describing what they saw in the night sky. I thought it was just poetry. To me, it makes it more profound.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's ways of celebrating what they were seeing in the night sky and finding ways that they could identify with it.
Absolutely.
And understand it and mark it and honor it. Because if you can make friends with these sky deities, they're more likely to smile upon your earthly endeavors.
Absolutely.
I think. I spend a lot of time talking to the moon. I spend a lot of time talking to the planets when I'm outside at night. That's one of the best ways to get to know them. And just, if things are going right, I'm saying thank you. Thank you for the clients that come my way. Thank you for the friends in my life. If I don't say
thank you for the books that I write.
Yeah, there's that too.
That I write.
Having a fabulous pictures and lovely people that talk to me on the radio. Things like that. If we don't say thank you for what we're getting, why they may not realize that we want more.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
Maybe she didn't like that. Well, let's not send her any more of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, Renna Shesso. Shesso. The magical tour of the night sky. Use the planets and stars for personal and sacred discovery. You actually told me that you really were not really quite. I mean, when you began, you told us when you began that everything was done by with a pencil and a paper and everything, and it's so amazing to see that you're actually the author of a book that it's called Math of Mystics.
Yeah.
After all of these years of sacrifice. Yes.
Mystical math is absolutely my best kind. I was actually in a rear-ender accident about 13 years ago. And as accidents go, this was incredibly minor. So I don't mean to compare my agony with stuff that, where people had other kinds of horrible injuries. Yeah. But I did have cognitive injuries from the accident where, it's a shaken head injury. And, the trouble with that, as my doctor pointed out, if you've got a broken leg, it'll heal on a pretty specific timeline. And in the meantime, you're limping around and everyone knows you're hurt. With cognitive problems, they have no timeline for how it might heal, if at all. And no one can tell anything's much different except maybe you seem spacey. It was incredibly frustrating. And I don't know that it's healed yet, honestly, but there's portions of it that
fine to us.
Yeah, but there's gaps. But
we all have them, and we don't have injuries.
That's right, we do, and so we find a way of adapting to it and building new pathways in our brains. But one of the things that happened following that accident was numbers became really interesting to me. Anytime I was reading something and I found some magical lore that involved numbers, I would underline it, I'd make a big note of it, and started thinking, why doesn't someone put all of this in just one book, for Pete's sake, instead of all over the place? And then, of course, realized, well, I could do that. So I did. And this started as a small self-published book to follow up on some other small self-published book, and it was on a shelf in a store in Denver, and someone from Weiser just happened to see the book, and that's how
It's
that's how I
published by
came
Wiser
to
now,
publishing
right?
with Wiser. Yeah, they saw my, pamphlet-like book and said, "Wow, this is interesting. Can you expand on this?" And of course I could. So, because there's an
Wow.
awful lot of math
Oh yeah,
history.
yeah.
The funny thing with the mathematics stuff is when I read math history books, they were very loath to mention the fact that math had mystical
Yes.
relationships.
Yes.
When I read mystical books, they might mention the significance of numbers, like tie 3 knots in your magical cord or whatever, but they don't want to get into the math history because that sounds too much like arithmetic. So again, like astronomy, astrology split, there's a real split within math in terms of we use it symbolically in our magical workings, but often don't understand any of the roots of why we use the symbolic numbers that we do. And I think that's kind of a gap, the idea that we use things but don't understand why.
Absolutely.
I like to know the reason behind doing things, just so I'm more fully present in what's going on.
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't know what you do or why you're doing it, you don't have the, you don't have the full understanding of what you're doing, really. And I think that's, So this is another publication from you, Renna Shesso, Math for Mystics, and this is actually another Wiser book.
It is another Wiser book with the longest subtitle in history. Fibonacci sequence to Luna's labyrinth to the golden section and other secrets of sacred geometry.
Well, it has to be said.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, but remember, my background is in the arts.
Yes, I know.
So this one also is heavily illustrated and written in terms that even an artist like myself can understand. It probably won't help you balance your checkbook, but it's got a lot of pictures that help you understand, the shape of the pentacle, why it's magical, why we use the different numbers we use in our magical workings. And I found that lore absolutely fascinating, but that was part of what spiraled on into the Magical Tour of the Night Sky book. A lot of advances early on in mathematics were based on the need from astronomers to more accurately be able to note what they were measuring in the night sky. So math developments came out of a need to understand and more clearly be able to express what was seen in the heavens.
Will you come back with the Math of the Mystics?
Oh, I'd love to talk about that.
Because we would love to have you talking about the math of for mystics. Because I think that it's one of the things that we do is that we do use numbers, and we do use numbers, but in our practices, but we don't really know why we do them. Why is it 3 the sacred number? Why is it 7? Blah blah. Why is it So I think that it's absolutely essential for us to have you again on this show talking about math, but this time for mystics.
I would love to do that. There's an old Stevie Wonder song, Superstitious.
Yes.
When you believe in things that you don't understand, then you suffer. And, I don't want to suffer. I want to be able to understand the things I believe in.
Absolutely.
And that's not an unreasonable request.
Of course not. Of course not. So, Renna Shesso, a magical tour of the night sky. Use the planets and stars for personal sacred discovery. Thank you so much, Renna, for being here on Witch Talk and really to share with us your fantastic wisdom of the skies and the stars.
Thank you, Kerrigan. It was absolutely delightful. It's so fun talking to you.
It's wonderful. All right, so we have a promise. You'll come back with the math, right?
Indeed, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
all right.
Heard it first.
Okay. So don't go anywhere. Don't hang up. I will talk to you in a minute. I always like to talk with the guests after the show. I'm just going to close the show, and then I will be with you in a minute, okay?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for being on Witch Talk. Thank you.
All the listeners, good night.
Thank you. So that's it. This is the last part. We just traveled the skies, and we kind of were guided by Renna on this journey, and it was absolutely fascinating. Next week we'll be back again with more Witch Talk for you. Until then, have a wonderful week. Bye bye.